Have you ever experienced a moment where you felt the presence of a deceased loved one? For many, the idea of life after death can be comforting or unsettling, depending on personal beliefs. But what if we told you that there are subtle signs suggesting that our departed loved ones are still with us, guiding us from the other side? One of the most common signs is a sudden, unexplained feeling of their presence. Many people have reported feeling a soft breeze or a distinct scent, like their loved one's perfume or the smell of their favorite food. These sensations seem to appear without a clear source, leaving us wondering if it's just our imagination or something more profound. Additionally, some people experience vivid dreams where they interact with those who have passed. These dreams often feel incredibly real, as though the deceased person is still very much alive, offering advice or simply sharing a comforting presence. Interestingly, objects in our homes can sometimes seem to move on their own. A light flickers unexpectedly, a picture frame falls off the wall, or a familiar object reappears in a place where it wasn't before. These occurrences are often dismissed as coincidences, but could they be signs that our loved ones are trying to reach out? For many, these experiences don't feel random. They're a form of communication that transcends the physical world, reminding us that death doesn't necessarily mean goodbye. Instead, it may simply be a change in the form of our connection, a connection that still exists, however intangible. When we think about the nature of life and death, it's easy to slip into the scientific view that consciousness is simply a byproduct of brain activity. Once the brain dies, so too does our sense of self. But what if this assumption is too simplistic? What if consciousness is not confined to the physical realm at all? What if, in the moments after death, the spirit or soul remains intact and connected to the world, just out of reach, waiting to be recognized? Consider the phenomenon of the deathbed vision. These are experiences reported by the dying, vivid encounters with deceased loved ones, spiritual beings, or even light-filled realms. One famous example involves a man named Walter, who, on his deathbed, looked up and exclaimed, "There she is. My mother. She's come to take me home." Walter's mother had passed away over 30 years earlier, and his family had never spoken to him about any hallucinations or premonitions. Yet, in his final moments, he saw her, clear as day, waiting to guide him. His words were calm, and his expression peaceful, as though the visitations weren't strange at all. Many people who experience deathbed visions report feelings of comfort and even joy, dispelling any notions of fear. It seems that these encounters have an opposite effect than what one might expect in the face of mortality. Instead of dread, the dying report feeling ready, at peace, and sometimes even elated. The idea that our loved ones return to help us make this transition is powerful. It speaks to the fundamental human need to not just understand death, but to experience it with a sense of connection, love, and support. Medical researchers and doctors are studying these experiences, often documenting them in the context of near-death experiences or simply as part of the complex process of dying. Christopher Kerr, a hospice physician, has spent years collecting stories from terminal patients about their deathbed visions. In his book, Death is But a Dream, he explores the notion that these experiences are more than mere brain activity or hallucinations. Rather, they may be a glimpse into a deeper truth, that we are never truly alone. These visions aren't always the grand, otherworldly encounters we might imagine. Sometimes, it's simply a fleeting sense that someone is nearby, a loved one's touch, their voice, or the unmistakable feeling that they haven't gone anywhere. This sense of continuity, of a presence still lingering in the ether, gives many a sense of hope. It's as if the boundary between life and death isn't as firm as we think. Perhaps, in the most vulnerable moment of our existence, we find that the world we leave behind isn't as separate from us as we believed. And so, we are left to wonder, is this proof of life after death? Or is it just an intricate pattern woven into the fabric of our consciousness, crafted to make sense of the inevitable? The question may never be answered, but for those who have experienced such moments, the truth seems clear. Death is not the end. It's simply another step in a journey of connection, understanding, and yes, love. As we dive deeper into these eerie, but compelling, phenomena, it's important to remember that science has its place in explaining what happens when we die. But there's also a wealth of unexplained experiences that many people report, from ghostly encounters to intuitive messages from the other side. These stories, though often dismissed by skeptics, speak to a much broader truth that many of us are afraid to acknowledge: the afterlife may be far more real than we think. Take, for instance, the case of Anna, a woman who was grieving the sudden loss of her beloved husband. For weeks, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, not in a sad or depressive way, but in a way that made her feel like her husband wasn't truly gone. One evening, as Anna sat alone in her living room, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she was startled to find nothing there, but the sensation lingered. It was as if someone was walking just behind her, their presence unmistakable. She described it as the feeling of being hugged from behind, as if the air itself was gently caressing her. A few days later, she found an old photo in her attic, one she'd never seen before. It was a picture of her and her husband in a garden, taken on their honeymoon. What struck her was that in the photo, her husband was smiling with his arms outstretched as if he had just embraced someone. It was at that moment she realized, her husband's spirit had never left her. The visitations, the warmth she felt, it was him, still by her side. Similar accounts of post-death encounters are not uncommon. From people hearing loved ones call their names to feeling the sensation of a hand brushing theirs, these experiences are often dismissed by the scientific community as grief hallucinations or subconscious projections. But are they? What if our minds are not playing tricks on us? What if these experiences are valid, tangible manifestations of something beyond our understanding? Could it be that the lines between the living and the dead are more blurred than we ever thought? As we explore these stories, it's crucial to consider that these experiences might not be tied solely to the brain or a psychological state. Some believe that consciousness can persist beyond physical death, existing in a realm we simply cannot see, but perhaps feel. Is it possible that when we lose someone, they leave behind not just memories, but traces of their essence, their energy, that continue to linger in our lives? The idea that we might be able to connect with our deceased loved ones isn't new. It's woven throughout history, in spiritual practices and religions that have emphasized the idea of life after death, of spirits crossing over and communicating with the living. Whether it's through dreams, visions, or direct communication, many cultures believe that death is not an end but a transition. And it's in these moments, when the veil between worlds seems to thin, that some of us catch a glimpse of what lies beyond. After hearing such stories, it's easy to question, could these experiences be more than just imagination? In the case of Maria, a woman in her late 40s, the reality of her husband's death seemed so final, yet, her connection to him was undeniable. One evening, she was sitting alone in her kitchen, a place they often spent time together. Suddenly, she heard a faint whisper of her husband's voice calling her name. She rushed to the living room, only to find everything still, but the feeling of his presence was unmistakable. What makes Maria's experience even more compelling is the fact that her husband had been a known skeptic of the supernatural. He'd often laughed off such stories, but Maria knew better. For weeks after his passing, she felt as though he was still guiding her, offering his wisdom from the other side. Sometimes it was a whisper in the wind, other times it was the sound of their old favorite song playing on the radio, seemingly out of nowhere. These visits aren't unique to Maria. Many people across the world report similar occurrences. Some believe that these experiences are signs of a deep emotional connection that transcends the physical body. But others, more scientifically inclined, attribute them to the brain's response to grief. Could the mind, in its state of sorrow, create these sensations to provide comfort and closure? While the debate continues, the reality of these encounters speaks to something far deeper than simple coincidence. They suggest that perhaps we never truly lose the ones we love, and that their energy continues to resonate within our lives. What if the boundaries between life and death are not as rigid as we once thought? So, what do these stories really mean? Are they simply remnants of our grief, or do they suggest something far more profound about the nature of life and death? As we dig into this concept, we start to encounter a pattern. The people who report these experiences are often those who have had strong emotional bonds with the deceased. It's as though the more deeply we care for someone, the stronger their presence feels after they're gone. But why does this happen? One possible explanation is the concept of energy. We know that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only transferred. Is it possible that the energy of a person, their emotions, thoughts, and consciousness, could continue to exist even after death? Some spiritual beliefs suggest that the soul is a form of energy that persists beyond the body. This energy might not be visible to the naked eye, but it could interact with the living world in subtle ways, through feelings, sensations, or dreams. For example, consider the experience of Mark, a man whose brother passed away unexpectedly. Mark reported feeling his brother's presence around him, especially when he was working on a project that they had once planned together. It wasn't just a fleeting thought, it was a clear, palpable sense of his brother guiding him, offering silent encouragement. Mark described it as though his brother's energy had not dissipated, but rather found a way to remain connected to him. These stories, though deeply personal, suggest that perhaps death is not the absolute end we believe it to be. Rather, it might be a transition, a shift in the form of existence. The question remains, how do we fully understand these encounters? Is it just wishful thinking, or is there something more to these experiences that transcends our current understanding of reality? The idea that the deceased continue to influence our lives is not just relegated to personal experiences. It's also present in many cultural beliefs and traditions around the world. In some cultures, it is believed that the spirits of the deceased linger in the realm of the living, watching over their loved ones and even interacting with them through dreams or signs. In the traditions of many indigenous cultures, ancestors are seen as continuing to guide their descendants long after death. It's not uncommon for people to report feeling their ancestors' presence or receiving guidance in times of need. Whether it's a sudden realization, a chance encounter, or even a dream, the influence of the deceased is often seen as a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. In other traditions, like those practiced in parts of Asia, the deceased are honored through rituals that ensure they continue to exist in the afterlife. In these cultures, there is a belief that the deceased can send messages back to the living, and these messages often come in forms that we might dismiss as coincidence, like a flickering light, a strange sound, or an object moving on its own. But what if these experiences aren't just cultural beliefs, but a reflection of something deeper, a universal truth that transcends time and place? What if these experiences are a sign that, in some way, we are all connected, even beyond the boundaries of death? While many of us find comfort in these stories, the truth is that the line between skepticism and belief is often blurred. For those who have never experienced anything that could be called paranormal, these accounts might seem like nothing more than coincidence or fantasy. Yet, for those who have felt the presence of a deceased loved one, the experience can be profoundly real. So, why does this divide exist? One theory is that our brains are wired to seek patterns, especially during times of emotional distress. When we lose someone close to us, the brain goes through an intense grieving process, trying to make sense of the loss. This can result in vivid dreams, hallucinations, or a heightened sensitivity to signs and symbols, things that we might otherwise ignore. However, there is another possibility, that these hallucinations are not merely the result of grief, but are actual interactions with the energies of the deceased. Could it be that our minds are simply more attuned to these subtle messages during moments of loss? Even skeptics admit that there's something profound about these encounters. Some suggest that our emotional connection with the deceased might create a space where their energy is able to communicate with us in ways we don't fully understand. Could it be that love itself, that powerful, invisible force, has the ability to transcend death? Ultimately, the mystery of life after death is one that continues to captivate us. We may never fully understand the true nature of these experiences, but one thing is clear: our relationships with the deceased are far more complex than we have been led to believe. Whether we see these encounters as the result of emotional processing or as a glimpse into something beyond the physical realm, they continue to offer us comfort and insight. It's essential to remember that, in the end, we are not alone. Even in death, our loved ones may continue to watch over us, offering their presence, guidance, and love in ways we may not fully comprehend. Perhaps it is this belief, that love transcends even death, that gives us the strength to move forward in times of loss. As we reflect on these stories, it becomes clear that death is not an end, but a transition. A transition that may be filled with unexplainable moments of connection. The boundaries between the living and the deceased might not be as clear as we think. And if we remain open to the possibility that life continues after death, we may find that the spirits of those we've lost are never truly gone.